Okay, here's our first review for the SOL. We're going to think all the way back to September and talk about the world in 1500, how the world looked in terms of where the empires were, what they looked like, who they traded with, and where their religions were located. So this is SOLs 2A, C, D, and E. All right, so the world in 1490, the map as drawn by a European looked something like this. They knew about Europe. They had a pretty good idea where everything was laid out in Europe. They had somewhat of an idea about North Africa and the Middle East in this area. They had a little bit of idea about Africa in the south, but that's kind of wrong. India is pretty much missing in terms of where it comes off, and Asia is questionable. Now, the part that they're missing is going to be North America, because obviously North and South America, they haven't discovered those yet. Okay, and word hasn't come back from Columbus will leave in 2 years. So, in around approximately 1500, these are the major states and empires in the Eastern Hemisphere: England, France, Spain, Russia, the Ottoman Empire in Asia, Persia, China, Mughal India, and the Songhai Empire in Africa. And then the major states and empires in the Western Hemisphere that we need to know are the Incan Empire and the Aztec Empire, which you should remember from last year in World War I. So in Europe, the European powers, we have England up here in red, off the coast on island. We have France down here in green. Spain's going to be down here in orange. Russia is the area that on this map is called Muscovy. Okay, it's going to expand later on to take over all of what you see as Lithuania in the Crimean Khanate. And then the Holy Roman Empire is this area in the middle where today you would think Germany exists. And now all of these are generally going to be Christian of some sort. Russia is Orthodox Christian, if you remember the split in Christianity back in World War I. But England, France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire are all Catholic, because you can either be Catholic Christian or Orthodox Christian at this time. They are all monarchies, so they all have kings and queens. And they all pretty much get along with each other a lot, aside from a couple different wars, but that's standard in Europe. They're going to trade with each other. You can see the yellow lines are the movement of trade, so you can see a lot of it is done through the ocean. And that's because roads at this time were full of potholes, if they even existed at all. So generally, goods were traded through the yellow lines and through the oceans and ships. Now in Africa, we need to know about the Songhai Empire. They are left from Mali. They're going to be at the end of the Saharan trade routes, so the trade routes that go across the desert, and they are Muslim. You can see Timbuktu is in the center of Africa, of the Songhai Empire, and you can remember about them from past units. Here are the yellow lines, the yellow dotted lines are the trans-Saharan Africa. Remember, trans means across, so they go across the Sahara, they cross the desert, and those are going to move goods from the Mediterranean Sea and Europe all the way down through the Songhai Empire, and goods are going to be exchanged back and forth. Now in the Americas, remember we've talked about last year the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Incas. The Aztecs are going to be conquered by the Spanish, by Hernando Cortez, later on in this course. The Inca will be conquered by Francisco Pizarro for the Spanish. The Mayans will get taken over by the Aztecs, but they're all complex and advanced civilizations. So they have their own calendars, they have their own forms of architecture, they have written languages, they trade with each other. They're pretty advanced civilizations. And like I said, they're going to be conquered by the Spanish once the two hemispheres get connected. Now in the Middle East, think of the area that today we're focusing in Iraq, previously in this country. But we're going to look at the Ottoman Empire, which through its military, or force of arms, is going to dominate all of the areas around the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea. So today what you would think of as Turkey and Syria. Now they're going to conquer the city of Constantinople, and rename it Istanbul. So today we would call it Istanbul. Constantinople is important because, as you can see on the map, it's right here between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. It controls that strait, or the very narrow area that ships have to pass through. So if Russia wants to get goods down to the Mediterranean or from the Mediterranean, the Ottomans are able to put a tax on these trades that pass through and get really super rich. Russia's not going to be happy about that, so we'll see a couple wars later on. But you can see the extent in yellow of how big the Ottoman Empire gets. It's not as big as Rome had gotten, but it's still going to be very big. Now, the Ottomans are known for their Turkish coffee. It's going to be traded throughout the empire, and their ceramics, which are very different. They look similar to Chinese, but the designs are much different. You can see the floral patterns that are going to be traded. Also in the Middle East, we have the Safavids, or the Persian Empire as we know them. They are an Islamic empire just like the Ottomans are, and they are made up of Shiite Muslims, not Sunni Muslims. They are a strong united empire in what is today Iran, and they are going to trade heavily in silk. They were previously incredibly strong with the military, but at 1500 they're starting to have some problems. So you can see the Ottoman Empire in green on this map. The Safavid Empire is in red. And next we are going to talk about the Mughal Empire, which is technically in Asia. All right, so here's our Asia picture. So Mughal India is going to be set up by the Muslim invader Babur, who is descended of Genghis Khan. So that's kind of how you get the name Mughal, kind of from Mongol. At its height, when it's the biggest, it's going to be led by their prince called Akbar. The significant thing about Mughal India is that they demonstrate a lot of tolerance towards the Hindus and the Buddhists. Even though they're a Muslim nation, they're very tolerant towards other religions. Now, they're known for their magnificent art and architecture in the Persian style, the best example of which is the Taj Mahal. And they're also going to spread the Indian Arabic numerals that we use today in math class throughout the rest of Asia and throughout the rest of the world to Europe through their trade routes. So if you look at the map, you can see how they start in the dark pink, and then they're going to spread south and kind of out into the middle pink and then down into the light pink. And so by their height, you can see Akbar added all of this dark middle pink area to his previous rule, and so he really expanded that empire. Here's a picture of the Taj Mahal. It took a little while to build, and it was built as a tomb for the loved wife of Shah Jahan. His wife's name is Mumtaz. Now, the Mughals also traded with the European nations. For example, the Dutch are going to come and create the Dutch East India Company to trade with everything that they want from India. Because as we're going to talk about in a little bit, the Indians have a lot of goods that the Europeans want, particularly spices. Also in Asia, we have Ming China. Now the word Ming means brilliant in Chinese, and they are going to throw off all of the Mongol influence. So they're getting rid of the Mongols and pushing the Mongols back north. So getting rid of the Mongol influence means they're returning China to the Confucian ideals. You should remember that from last year. They are known for inventing the compass. They are going to keep their capital at Beijing, which I'll show you on a map in a second, and build the Forbidden City, which is where their emperor lives. They're known for producing silk and paper and porcelain, which you can see down here in the corner with the vase with a dragon on it. And they're going to reestablish the Silk Road leading over to Europe, because the Mongols had kind of destroyed that for a while. So Europe's going to get reconnected with Ming China. Later on, at the end of the 1600s, they'll become much more isolationist, meaning they're closing their doors and not allowing any Western or European influence. But for right now, they're still trading with Europe. Here's our map. You can see Beijing is going to be up here. It's very close to the Mongol area, which you can see up here in brown. This dark brown line is our Great Wall of China, which is going to be built and finished during this area to keep the Mongols out of China. And the Ming Empire is going to take over all of this purple area of China. Now, later, like I said, China and Japan are going to try to limit all European influence by adopting a policy of isolation. So they're closing their doors, they're building walls, they're shutting themselves off from the rest of the world. Now, Japan at this time period is in the Tokugawa period. They have a powerless emperor, but their emperor is seen as a god on earth, and they are ruled by a military leader. Now, in Japanese, they call them the shogun. One way that you can remember the levels of society is through the acronym SPAM. So the shogun is always at top, right underneath the emperor, but the shogun has more power. And then you have the samurai, the peasants, the artisans, who make all the pretty pictures, and then finally the merchants. So the merchants are lowest. And Japan at this point is going to be Buddhist. So that is all of the empires of the world, and a little bit about them at 1500.